Thank you. I have a. Yeah. In 2009, an Eritrean journalist received a phone call in the middle of a live radio program. It was a man being tortured, asking her desperately for help and for money that the kidnappers were demanding from him. This was just the first call out of many to come. Little did she know this was not an isolated event, but instead a part of a huge human trafficking cycle exploiting, torturing, and murdering innocent refugees. My name is Vanessa Berhe, and like they said, I'm 18 years old. I live in Sweden, I'm born there, but I originally come from Eritrea, which is a country in the Horn of Africa. Like they mentioned, my interest and passion for human rights originate from the fact that my uncle is a political prisoner and journalist who's been imprisoned in Eritrea since 2001, actually, so for 13 years this fall. And eventually I started hearing about this phenomenon that was going on, and I got interested, started reading more about it, and eventually got involved in the process of stopping it. So today there's basically a humanitarian crisis going on in the Sinai Desert. Refugees from the Horn of Africa are being kidnapped from refugee camps in Sudan and Ethiopia to the Sinai Desert, where they're being tortured, abused, and held for ransom. Today I'm going to talk about what's going on, what's happening in the Sinai Peninsula, how they're brought there, why this crisis began, and some possible solutions. So before I start, we're going to talk about who these victims are, because this actually plays a huge role in the emergence of this trafficking cycle. So 95% of all the victims and hostages in the Sinai are Eritreans. And there are several reasons to why this is. First of all, there's been a huge population of refugees, Eritrean refugees, after the Ethiopian and Eritrean War in 1998 till 2000. And after this, in 2001, Eritrea officially became a dictatorship, and they implemented something called national service, which is actually, after you turn 18, you have to go to national service for a year, and if you don't pass the bar for the university, you're basically kept there indefinite. So this has actually been referred as national slavery, because the conditions are terrible, there's no payment, there's no rights, you live in terrible huts and without clean water, any access to, sanitary stuff. So it's been called national slavery. So because of this, there 5,000 people are fleeing the country every month, actually. It's after Syria, or before what's going on in Iraq right now, Eritreans were the biggest refugee group coming to Europe, actually. Some of these people are fleeing or reuniting with their families or fleeing to countries to provide financial support for the people that are still left in Eritrea. And in order to leave the country, no one almost are given exit visas. So only if you're really, really sick or if you're a really, really young child, you're given an exit visa. So almost all of these refugees are fleeing illegally. And they are paying smugglers to get out from Eritrea, basically. And this is actually quite interesting, because these persons, that are smuggling these people, it's the same people, but the label changes. So a person can go from being a smuggler to a trafficker without the victim even noting. So what they're doing first is that they, let's see, I think they have, yeah. So they smuggle to get out from Eritrea. And then in order to reach the refugee camps, which is one is called Mai Aini in Ethiopia and one is called Shagareb in Sudan, they pay guides to take them there, because this is basically in the middle of the desert. And the map is quite small, I see from here, but you can see that where the red line starts, down south, that's where the refugee camps are. And some of these refugees are kidnapped either at the border of Eritrea and Ethiopia and Sudan, or at the camps. So, let's see. Some are trafficked by the guides, some are trafficked by the smugglers, some are trafficked while working to earn money for survival, some are trafficked within the camps, especially in Sudan. And what happens here is that you see it's quite a long distance from the refugee camps to the actual, to the Sinai. So most of these people are sold several times, on an average 4 to 5 times per victim. So these victims and refugees are not seen as human beings, but rather as commodities that are sold several times for thousands and thousands of dollars for each and new kidnapper. So the recruiters have been identified are, well, that's also very small, I'm really sorry. Rashida cycles in Sudan, Bedouin circles in Sinai and Sudan, Eritrean government officials, surveillance unit in Eritrea, traffickers inside the refugee camps, and guards that are working in the refugee camps. When these people finally, or at least when they reach these camps, I'm sorry for the disturbing pictures, but I felt that we needed to give a clear idea what's going on at these camps. So when they come to these camps, they're put at the basement of the Bedouin families, which is an ethnic group, a tribe that live right close to the border of Israel and Egypt. It's been referred to a lawless state because of there have been disputes if the area belongs to Israel or Egypt for a really long time. And right now there's barely like any military surveillance there, so you can basically do whatever, as these people has obviously taken advantage of. And the conditions, as you can see in these basements, are terrible. The refugees are constantly under psychological and physical torture. The hostages are tortured on a daily basis. And what's interesting is that compared to many other stories and testimonies we're here today, the purpose is not to, they're not using them sexually or for labor. The main purpose is to get money. So they're torturing them, but it's to an extent that they're not killed. So one woman who has been held in Sinai explains it like this. These kidnappers, their objective is to keep us barely alive, so we will try not to escape or give them trouble, while at the same time torturing us, so we are forced to pay. The kidnappers have the policy of torturing the healthy and taking care of the afflicted, because from what we understand, they do not care if we're alive or dead, but rather about the money. They don't want us dying before they can get the money. So in general, there's 2 to 5 torturers executing the torture, and then some guards watching, so no one will interfere while doing this. And these are some examples of the kind of torture that are being made in the Sinai. So it's beating, electrocution, burning, hanging upside down, mutilation, amputation, exposure to the torture of other hostages, especially for women to see their own children being tortured. Giving of pot, there was withholding of faith practices, rape, and sexual violence. And as in any, what's unique with this phenomenon as well is that while these people are being tortured, they're given telephones so they can call their relatives and demand money from their relatives. So like the journalist I told you about in the introduction, they happened to get her number because they heard she was interested in human rights. So she continued getting these calls every day and every night for years, still today. And the ransoms can go up to $50,000 US, and it's been estimated, or what we know exactly, there's been $600 million transferred to these kidnappers in the Sinai since 2009. So in 6 years, $600 have been transferred from Western banks, or Western Union and such. There's also torture camps where they're kept for days, and they're being exposed to torture on and on and on, just until, but not so they're killed. And if they're killed, they're just thrown to the desert. Like any other situation, the situation for children and women are usually different, and sometimes even worse. Women suffer extreme sexual violence, sexual abuse, rape. Like I said before, many women flee with their children, so they're exposed to their children being, exposed to violence and torture and murder even. Sometimes the children are taken from the mothers without any information about where they're going. So the parents, of course, are dying because they don't know where their children are. And if the proportion of children in the unknown population is the same as it is in the known population, it has been estimated that it is 30% children, actually, that are here in the Sinai. And the children are exposed to the same kind of torture as the adults. The only difference is that the children don't have the same mental capacity to handle these kind of events. So there's been evidence of children trying to hurt themselves, kill themselves, suffering after being exposed for this for a really, really long time. And also, after these people, some of them are killed, and everyone in Eritrea are religious, or either Muslims or Christians, and in both religions, it's an extremely important factor to be buried after you're dead. But these kidnappers basically just throw them in the desert, they're not even identified, not given a funeral or any dignity at all, which of course is a kind of psychological torture for both of the families living abroad and the families that are witnessing this, that are still left there. And actually, many of these people they're not rescued, they just pay the ransom and are free, basically. But what we realize is that even after you're liberated from the Sinai, you're still not free. Because what happens is, for example, Israel is the closest country, and Israel has built a huge wall. It's, 250 kilometers long, and only 10 people has been able to cross this wall every month. Before they built this wall, there was 4,000 people every month. So imagine the amount of people they're not able to cross this wall. And once they leave Israel, they're treated as enemies. They're not giving any rights. And because of this anti-infiltration law that was instituted in 2008, these people are being treated as, like I said, enemies and not victims like they are. And even if you want to go to Europe, like most of you know, there are no legal ways to Europe as a refugee. So many of them they try to come through to Italy, actually. And as we may know, last year there was a terrible, I'm really sorry, boat accident outside the coast of Lampedusa here in Italy, where 369 refugees drowned, whereof I think 95 or 99%, I think there were like 2 Ethiopians and the rest were Eritreans, drowned. So my recommendations, first of all, we need to stop the traffickers. I think that's the most important factor. This is not a mafia in the same way as it is deeply rooted in many countries, such as Mexico, for example, where this has been going on for very long. This just started in 2008, after the Bedouins used to be the smugglers, so they used to smuggle Eritreans to Israel. But then after the anti-infiltration law, Eritreans stopped going to Israel, so they lost their market, basically. So they're using this as a way to make up for the money that they lost. So this is not as deeply rooted and can actually be stopped, I think. So I think that Interpol, Egypt, Sudan, Eritrea, and Ethiopia need to find these trafficking cycles and prosecute them. Because just as in many other cases, the laws exist. This is illegal in all of the forms. But there hasn't been any convictions done. For example, Sudan has only prosecuted 14 cases, and it's been estimated that around 40,000 people have been trafficked there. So 14 out of 40,000 is nothing. No Egyptian official has been prosecuted. No Sudanese officials have been prosecuted. So that's one of the first things we need to do. The second is we need to make the refugee camps a safe place. And the third thing is that we need to make, like you said, these victims are trafficked illegally, so they're afraid to give their testimonies. So instead, we need to protect them in order to find the real traffickers. And my last recommendation is a bit informal and more general, but it's that we need to talk about these victims, and we need to talk about the stories of all of these stories that we listened to today, because we need to put pressure on this government to stop making this go on. For example, like I mentioned, my uncle has been in prison for 13 years in Eritrea, and no pressure has been put on that government to release him or his colleagues. And that's why I actually started the organization. And I'm inviting all of you to help me spread this to all of your countries. because all of these stories are actually connected. It's just about putting pressure on our governments, showing that we do not accept the concept of modern slavery in 2014. So we need to take a stance, and I'm really happy that we have met here all together and that we've been able to hear each other's stories, but I think we need to take this forward and we need to come together and be the voice of the voiceless. Thank you.